Kia ora koutou, ko karangahaki toku manga, ko taere toku awa, ko owhiraua toku rere, no karangahaki awa awa aho, no otahuna toku kainga inaianei, ko Shannon Davis toku ingoa, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So thank you for having me speak today. My name is Shannon Davis and I grew up in the North Island of New Zealand in the Karangahaki Gorge, and I now live in Otahuna near Lincoln University. I'm a lecturer in landscape architecture here at Lincoln University, and I'm also a researcher in the Centre of Excellence Designing Future Productive Landscapes with Pablo. So I lead the research theme Future Foodscapes for Health, and as part of that research, I have a particular interest in urban agriculture. And as you will see with this project presented today, I've been looking specifically at animal-based urban agriculture, an area of urban agriculture that has not been widely studied from an urban design perspective. So this research explores the potential contribution of grazing animals and animal-based urban agriculture within cities of the global north as a multi-beneficial layer in public green space design. This research is ongoing, and today I will primarily be speaking about the initial case study research I have done into Cornwall Park, a 172 hectare public park in central Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. Okay, so the presentation today will briefly discuss the following questions. Why are grazing lands and animal-based urban agriculture not commonly part of cities of the global north today? What is the spatial relationship today between urban settlements and food production in Aotearoa, New Zealand? And how can we reintegrate animal-based agriculture back into our cities and settlements? And today I'm going to present the case study of Cornwall Park in Tamaki Makaurau. So why are grazing lands and animal-based agriculture not commonly part of cities of the global north today? As a basic essential for life, food has always been a critical part of any city, including its production, movement and transportation, distribution, places of consumption and waste. The spatial relationship between food production and urban settlements has been critical in the development of cities and civilizations throughout the world, and the design and provision for the spaces that allowed farming and agriculture practices to occur have been part of cities since they first developed over 10,000 years ago. So with the advent of railways, however, in the 19th century, many cities of the global north were essentially liberated from the spatial constraints of the traditional geography of such things as food production and walkability, making it possible to build and extend urban settlements that were less constrained by size, shape, and location. With growing urban populations, overcrowded streets, dirty and chaotic slaughterhouses and stockyards and unhealthy animals furthered the notion that country produce was healthier and safer to consume than city produce. Across the 19th century, there appeared in local planning regulations a growing body of laws to remove urban-based agriculture. With many cities in the global north today relying on long and complex food supply chains, understanding around the localization of food production and access within urban settlements has grown in recent years. So this paper looks to extend the existing scope of urban agricultural research, usually focused on plant-based production, focused instead on the design and grazing land for animal husbandry and meat production within urban green spaces. So I've just popped this slide in to illustrate the historic relationship between cities and food. Street names can be such a rich indicator of history. In central London, for example, there are 494 roads, streets, lanes, plazas, squares and parks named after food and beverages, including references to venison, bacon, ham, poultry, and including names such as Cock Lane, Horseferry Road, Bacon Street, Sheep Lane, Cow Lane, Ham Yard, Ewe Close, Ram Street, and Ram Place, just to name a few. As cities have developed and urban land prices have risen, urban agriculture is not commonly seen today as an economical use of urban land, often now occurring within the voids of cities and settlements on vacant land for example, in places that have experienced population decrease or displacement due to economic downturn or natural disaster. So this then brings us to the question of what is the spatial relationship today between urban dwellers and food production in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Historically, the spatial relationship between rural and urban was a continuum where food production was a visible and vital component of urban systems as well as rural. Aotearoa, New Zealand is known worldwide for its primary food and fibre production. Agriculture is vital to the economy as well as being important in terms of national heritage and identity. Today, however, 87% of New Zealand's total population is urban, so living in the 4 urban zones identified as urban core, first suburb, suburban and peri-urban, with many New Zealanders having little or no physical or social connection to the rural zone where the majority of our food is produced. So for many New Zealanders, this is our most common experience of meat in the city. So how can we reintegrate animal-based agriculture back into cities and settlements, making it once again visible and connected with urban communities? In Aotearoa, New Zealand, a nation well known for its primary production and agricultural culture, animal agriculture is overwhelmingly considered to be a rural land use activity, with vast areas of rural land supporting large-scale primary production, and is not a common practice within the urban zones. Cornwall Park in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, however, provides an important case study example of an urban park facilitating multiple land uses, including grazing land for sheep and cattle. So using Cornwall Park as a case study, this research poses the question, how can grazing lands for sheep and beef production be designed within a public urban park alongside other park uses? So Cornwall Park is located in New Zealand's largest city, Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and it's bordered by the central suburbs of Epsom, Green Lane and Royal Oak, and is a 172 hectare public park. It was gifted to the people of New Zealand by Sir John Logan Campbell in 1903. It is surrounded today by medium to high density residential land use, as you can see in the image there. The park includes traditional elements that you might expect in an urban green space, including vast lawns, formal staircases, cafes and restaurants, specimen trees, woodlands, and ornamental gardens, and is commonly used for recreation, visiting cafes, dog walking, and people commuting through the park to work. But it also includes a working farm and is home to 600 sheep and 60 cattle, doubling during July to September. The park has 2 full-time farmers, a team of sheepdogs, cattle yards, wool shed, and other facilities associated with a farming landscape. These animals are the neighbours to some of Auckland's most densely populated suburbs. So as you can imagine, the park works hard to negotiate the relationship between its animals and the public. Visitors and residents are actively invited to enter the fields to get closer to the animals, as you can see there in the bottom right image, with the fence style into the sheep paddock, or indeed to shorten their commute through the park. People have few restrictions with regards to where they can and cannot go within the park. As you can see in the top right image, people have created their own desire lines right through the middle of paddocks used for grazing. And it's only during lambing and calving that the public experience some restrictions. You can see in the images on the left, signage is used throughout the park to direct the public in appropriate behaviour. Park management also offer a range of education programs for neighbours, neighbourhood schools and visitors. And so to ensure the park's meaningfulness, longevity and positive relationship with the people of Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, in 2014, the Park Trust engaged the landscape architecture firms of USA-based Nelson Bird Waltz and New Zealand-based Boffa Limited to produce a 100-year master plan for the park. The master plan sets out a vision to ensure that the park remains committed to providing a multi-use public green space for recreation, exercise, biodiversity, cultural expression, and connection to the land and to nature. a park that expresses New Zealand's agricultural roots. So the master plan includes the consideration of 3 main land uses, including parkland zones, wildlife management zones, and agriculture management zones, are shown in this plan drawing by the tan colour that you can see there. With regards to the agricultural management zones, the principles of Ngā Mahi Ahu Whenua responds to the development of exemplary agricultural practices to provide agricultural connection for people and visitors to the park. The long-term vision of the master plan sees Cornwall Park demonstrating a whole systems approach to agriculture with production methods addressing global environmental issues and concerns. The master plan provides direction for a focus on increasing biodiversity, improving carbon sequestration, reducing use of agricultural inputs, providing innovative education and outreach, and long-term economic viability of the park operating as a working farm. The proposed introduction of gardens and crop production adds a new focus to the existing agricultural system, particularly with regards to the education of urban consumers and park neighbours. It is hoped that benefits derived from the diversifying of production systems within the park will result in carbon neutral livestock farming, where animals are raised on grass-based diets and are continuously rotated, increasing the capacity of the land to store carbon through building soil organic matter. The establishment of seasonal-based pastures with appropriate forage species will aid the year-round grazing and contribute to the overall resiliency and health of the system. Sheep will also be used to graze parkland and lawn areas in lieu of mowing. The proposal to develop vegetable production beds, potager gardens, trial plots and arbours will also support the sustainable local food production philosophy and the farm to table vision. The lack of research and implementation currently experienced for animal-based urban agriculture illustrates the complex urban contexts within cities of the global north. Inflexible planning rules, high land values, lack of suitable space and public perception may all contribute to the difficulties that surround the reintegration of grazing lands for animal urban agriculture within cities of the global north. So the question of public perception has directed my next step in this project. And in late 2020, I carried out a survey of residents living around the park to begin identifying the enablers and barriers to the integration of animals within public parks. So asking a series of 14 questions, I thought I would share with you today some of the initial responses to the survey. I haven't interrogated the survey data completely, so these just are some initial themes and indications that are coming out. So as you can see in the map on the right, I surveyed residents in 3 zones around Cornwall Park. And question 11 asked, please provide a brief explanation of what you like about having grazing animals within the park. And these were some of the responses. It is so nice to have a working farm in the middle of the city. We love spring when the animals are calving, etc., and feel privileged that our children have grown up with such easy access to this aspect of nature. It is amazing that we can walk on a path that takes us right through the paddocks to be able to be up close and personal with the animals. Another participant said, properly managed livestock grazing helps to reduce fire hazard by controlling the amount and distribution of grasses and other potential fuel. And finally, another participant said, which I think sums up many of the responses to this question, great for urban people to experience rural activities. Question 12 asked, please provide a brief explanation of what you do not like about having grazing animals within the park. And this respondent said, I do sometimes worry about the impact on the animals of having such frequent human contact and not always respectful contact, although the park farmers do well in trying to limit this and educate the public. On the other hand, however, another respondent replied, we do not like the cows grazing the park. 1, they are dangerous when calving, and this is not always understood by park visitors. 2, many paddocks are locked to the public when animals are grazing. As the park is used more and more, this limits usage and results in overcrowding. Question 13 said, please provide a brief description of any positive or negative experiences you have had with the grazing animals, sheep and cattle within Cornwall Park. And this participant said, on occasion, we have discovered an animal, usually a lamb, outside its normal area or in a sickened looking state, in old stair ones, which has worried us. The positive aspect of this is that we have had a great response from the farmer when we have contacted them, either in person or on the phone, which is very reassuring. So in summary, when asked how positive do you feel towards having animals or having grazing animals within Cornwall Park, 86% of survey participants responded with the value of extremely positive. So in conclusion, the case study of Cornwall Park illustrates how the integration of livestock within public green spaces can provide both essential services for land management and maintenance, alongside growing agricultural literacy for urban populations, local food production, as well as fostering positive experiences for people having grazing animals as a central focus of public landscapes. Early analysis of this survey data indicates that animals at Cornwall Park are an integral and important part of this public landscape. Ngā mihi, thank you.
Thanks for that, Shannon. That was a really fascinating talk. I really enjoyed hearing about how public actually perceive agriculture in an urban setting. So I did just have one question, and then I'll open it up to everyone else. But just regarding biosecurity measures that are actually implemented in these, or in Cornwall Park, or in other systems, I noticed in one of the photos there was a sign saying dogs are allowed on a leash, and I just wonder what sort of systems do they have in place, because obviously dogs have the potential to carry pathogens and worms and such. So if they're not regularly wormed, then that could be passing on to the farm. Do you have any comments on that, or?
Yeah, well, in the case of Cornwall Park, I don't think it's a massive issue. So people can walk their dogs on leash right through the paddocks, right through the animals. And although that does cause issues sometimes if the dogs are let off the lead, which often comes down to an education thing, in terms of chasing lambs and sheep, and probably not so much with the cattle. But yeah, Anita, it hasn't come across as a major issue that has been spoken about by the farmer.
I just have a question here from Elizabeth McKenzie. Elizabeth, do you want to ask your question to everyone?
Yeah, I'm interested in this because so I used to live next to Cornwall Park. Now I actually live down in Fairlie, but what I was wondering is how much could Cornwall Park be a model for perhaps the Christchurch red zone? Would that be a consideration, or does the environment there preclude that kind of park?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely see that as being a viable option. I know that Sarah, under the Sarah Act, looked at integrating all sorts of food production systems and farming systems into the residential red zone. As that process has progressed, I'm not quite sure where it is at now with that vast park space that Christchurch residents are going to benefit from. But I don't know that those discussions for farming and food production have continued into the latest versions of the master plan for the residential red zone. But personally, I think it would be a great asset for Christchurch, and also a really productive use of that land.
Okay, I think the next question, Ian, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. So I've just got a lot of questions, but I'll see if I can focus in on one, which is our experience with management of kangaroos in Canberra. Kangaroos are wild and they use a lot of the green space, is that people became so attached to kangaroos that it's very difficult to manage them effectively in order to ensure that you get a range of the other ecosystem services that Greenspace provides. Do you think there is a risk of that here in the context of farming green space and the relationship that people have therefore with the animals and the other benefits that that provides? Some of that came through on some of your negative answers to the questions that you had. I think question 12 or question 13.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's a highly managed system that this park, is operated within, and overwhelmingly in the responses, and kind of my first look at responses to that survey data that came through, was that people absolutely love the animals. 86% of them deemed them extremely important to Cornwall Park, and in all of the quotes that came, or in many of the quotes that came through, people used words, quite emotional words, of their connection with the animals. They talked about their children growing up with the animals, of having relationships with the animals, of naming the animals. They felt privileged to be able to live so close to a working farm and to look out their windows and see those animals. So yeah, I think it's a highly managed system in what it is, and it has a huge amount of visibility and people who passively watch over the park. And one of the things that the farmer said to me was that during springtime, during lambing, he actually can receive up to 100 calls a day from neighbours and people using the park, concerned about animal welfare, wanting to make sure that what they were seeing was natural and was okay. And during that lambing time, they hire many more staff at the park to negotiate that relationship between people and make sure that the animals are safe.
John, would you like to ask your question?
I guess I was just thinking about, I really like the concept, but I also think about what the challenges are often for rural communities, particularly as you start to see losses of farms, and you get you have fewer farmers, maybe one big farm, that sort of thing, but you often have the infrastructural support that goes away. People order everything off of Amazon as opposed to going to their local parts dealer, that sort of thing. So I'm just kind of wondering, how is the farm operated, and what's the potential for doing this? I mean, if you were to set up a dairy at Cornwall Park, I mean, how practical would that be? And I'm asking that partly just to kind of poke sticks at the system, I guess, but thinking about the broader implications and opportunities to do this sorts of thing. What supports the farm operation to deal with 100 phone calls? You've got extra staff. How is that managed in kind of a practical sense? Because it just strikes me there would be some real challenges to doing this in Auckland without some sort of support.
Yeah, that's a great question, John. I know that Cornwall Park is very, very well staffed. So for 172 hectares, they have 2 full-time farmers. And then they have a whole lot of support staff that sit around that at different times of the year. They also have other parks. So Auckland has 29 regional parks, and many of those parks do include working farms. And they have Ambury Park, which is more in line with Cornwall Park. They have a very close interface between their animals and the public coming to visit. So also Cornwall Park has another tract of land sitting just outside the city, which it can use to manage its livestock numbers if it needs to. So I think you're exactly right. They've managed to make it work the way the park was set up, the trust deed and how it's written, the way it generates money in terms of leasing residential sections around the park. It is an exceptional example, I think, and maybe one that is difficult to replicate, but in all settings. But as an example of how it can happen, I think Cornwall Park provides a really interesting case study.